Evaluate the sine of the inverse sine of negative square root of 2 over 2. B. Inverse cosine of cosine 11 pi over 6. For A, notice that the trig function is on the outside, the inverse trig function is on the inside. I know that this is something to memorize, but there's a benefit to memorizing. It's very easy. The answer is equal to negative square root of 2 over 2. However, if as in the second case you have the inverse cosine of the cosine, it's not always equal to the exact argument here. Let's take a look at this. So to evaluate, first of all, the cosine of 11 pi over 6, what we have to do is go into the fourth quadrant and draw an angle from all the way around of 11 pi over 6, which would leave a reference angle of pi over 6 or 60 degrees. So if we did that, that would leave us with the classic 1, 2, square root of 3 triangle. And since we're below the x-axis, it would be a negative 1, 2, square root of 3 triangle. So the cosine of 11 pi over 6 would be equal to the adjacent side, which is root 3 divided by 2. So this would literally become the inverse cosine of square root 3 over 2, okay, just by substitution. Now, if you go to evaluate inverse cosine of root 3 over 2, you have to remember here that the range of this guy is on the interval 0 pi. And so, to evaluate inverse cosine of root 3 over 2, you're not going to get back the same 11 pi over 6. Automatically, you know this landed in quadrant 4, but the domain of the inverse cosine is restricted to 0 to pi. So that's going to be in quadrant 1 or 2. So it's not going to cancel off. It's not going to be 11 pi over 6. Let's see what it's going to be. So, cosine inverse of root 3 over 2, it's got to be in either the first or second quadrant. And how do you know which one? Well, it's positive, and therefore cosine is positive in quadrant 1. It has to be here. So we draw a triangle that has a cosine of root 3 over 2. Cosine is adjacent, or x, root 3 divided by 2, which is your r, or hypotenuse. And you recognize this as the, of course, the 1, 2 square root of 3 triangle. And here you get an angle of 30 degrees, or pi over 6 radians. So your answer is cosine inverse of root 3 over 2, which was, again from the original problem, cosine inverse of cosine 11 pi over 6 is actually just this angle here is equal to pi over 6. So remember, just remember this, that the inverse cosine has a restricted range, and therefore if it's on the outside, it's the final thing that you do. You're going to have to go through all the steps and evaluate. However, if it's on the inside, then you're going to get an ordinary sine function as the last thing that you do, and so you can get the cancellation.